Hi, and welcome to the Rooted in podcast. This podcast is hosted by Rooted in Language. Our mission is to help all learners become the best readers and writers they can be, both typical learners and those who struggle. We bring you our best understanding of how to teach students grades K through 12 based on the science of reading. I am Rita Sabasco. In this episode, we're not talking about educating kids. Instead, today's topic is about raising kids and how our parenting views impact our families. To help me with this discussion, I invited my sister, Jodi Weber. You may have heard our previous podcast with Jodi from season 2, episode 6, when she explained instructional conversation. In that podcast, Jodi and I discussed our family of origin and its influence on our conversational skills. Today, Jodi and I are once again discussing family of origin and its influences. In this case, we address how the homes we were raised in may intentionally or unintentionally influence the homes we create for our children. In an effort to help you be intentional rather than unintentional in creating your own family culture, we suggest you use a method of specifically choosing what ideals you want to keep from the home you were raised in and what ideals you do not want to expose your children to. I call this podcast Family Culture, choosing what to keep and what to toss aside. We've broken our discussion into 2 parts. This recording is part 1 and includes what Jodi and I each intentionally chose to keep from our original family and how we brought those ideals into our individual homes. Part 2 of this topic, which is presented in a separate podcast recording, is what Jodi and I each intentionally choose to discard from our family, from our original family, including how we each made choices regarding how to discipline our kids. Since Jodi happens to be an expert on behavior management, she has many insights to share. Hi, I'm Rita Sabasco with Rooted in Language, and today I am talking again with my sister, Jodi Weber. Jodi and I had a conversation probably in season 1 of our podcast, and we've gotten a lot of feedback that people enjoyed that conversation and they would like me to do another one. So Jodi is here with me today. Hi, Jodi.
Hey, Rita. Good morning.
Good
And
morning.
thank you for inviting me back. It's so exciting to me, like ridiculously exciting to me, that anybody enjoyed our conversation and that anyone would want us to do it again. So whoever you are, thank you. You've made my day.
What to keep and what to toss aside. We are going to talk about family culture, family heritage, and how we all make these decisions about what about the way we are raised or the dynamics that may still be going on in your original family, what we want to bring into our own families. And Jodi and I both have grown children now. They are adults, functioning adults in their 20s and 30s. And so this is kind of a look back a little bit for us, but it's interesting for me as a grandmother to listen to my own children have those same conversations, and also that there are things I did they are tossing aside.
And that's really interesting to me because I don't have any grandchildren yet. I have granddogs. But even with that, there are things that I am learning. My son is the one who has dogs. There are things I'm learning from he and his wife about better ways to raise a dog and better ways to sort of navigate that space. And yet I'm still able to add a little bit of wisdom. So,
and I think that's something to say up front is that it's very easy to say this was good, this was bad, and I think we can be hard on ourselves. What we did was wrong, what we did was right.
what our parents did, what are their flaws. I mean, we're all flawed humans, and we are always learning on the shoulders of those that went before. So this is not meant to be a trashing conversation. And I do want to apologize up front. We were raised in a generally happy family, not a perfect family, but a happy family. And that may or may not be your experience. And if it was, you may have a family where there really was not anything to keep. In which case it's always good to hear what other people experienced as you're creating a new culture for your family. So before we go any further,
if I can just say, I love embedded in that statement, Rita, just the hopeful nature of it. Again, it doesn't matter what you've come from. And in fact, our own mother did not come from anything from which to build upon, but she paid very close attention to those around her. And she would say, if I saw people who had kind, successful children, I did whatever they did. And if their children were not kind and successful, I ignored them. Just kind of in our mom fashion. But we're all learning and growing. There's an opportunity for all of us to be the best parents we can be. So I love you sort of opening that space, Rita.
Right. Before we go any further, I thought that maybe you could just remind people a little bit of who you are, where you are, what you do, etc.
Yeah, nice. I live in Athens, Georgia, and I, by training, have degrees in elementary education and also in special education, and that goes pre-K through 12th grade. I was a high school special ed teacher and an elementary school special ed teacher, and then also an elementary school administrator, both an assistant principal and principal. And after 32 years in public education, I retired and had the opportunity to go to the University of Georgia to serve as faculty at Class A, which is the Center for Latino Achievement and Success in Education. And we do professional development for in-service teachers in a pedagogy called instructional conversation. So our goal is to help teachers gain the skills and explore the space of opening both problem solving and conversation for kids to really explore their thinking, share their thinking, build off each other's thinking through the process of creating what is called a joint productive activity. What we have found is what the research shows, and teachers tell us over and over and over again, is that when kids can talk and share their thinking, their misconceptions, their understandings, that's where the most powerful learning occurs.
That's meaningful here at Rooted in Language, because we have been influenced by the work of Class A, and we have had a prior podcast, as I mentioned, about instructional conversation. We build from the oral language system to the literacy system, as is supported by the science of reading. And when we use terms like productive struggle versus destructive struggle, or that we want kids to be engaged, make a product, when we talk about deep learning, these are all things that have been influenced by Jodi's work. And when we have crossed paths and talked about all these things. The other thing we used to talk shop about all the time was when we were both young mothers raising kids. Jodi, you have 2 kids.
I do.
I have 3. Her youngest and my oldest are only a few months apart in age. So we kind of spanned, I don't know, maybe like a 10-year range, maybe in ages, or 9-year range. So we were, pretty much doing a lot of the same things at the same time. And we both, you just mentioned Mom, both our parents are deceased now. And Jodi gave you a little background on our mom, and I've talked about being submersed in Italian culture. So you want to tell them a little bit about Dad?
Yeah, so our father was one of 9 children born to Italian immigrants. Our grandfather immigrated from southern Italy and our grandmother from Sicily, and so was raised in an Italian American home in an Italian American neighborhood. And I would say for myself, I don't know about you, Rita, but I identified first and foremost as Italian.
It was the primary influence in terms of extended family culture.
Yeah, because as I said, Mom's family was not one that was very involved in our lives on purpose.
Mhm.
And Dad's family was very much involved. Our cousins were our best friends, and every Sunday there was a First Holy Communion party, or a confirmation party, or a baptism party,
yeah.
or a birthday party, or so it was a large, robust, loud family.
Right. And but very working class. So birthday parties didn't mean there were a lot of presents, or even that the party revolved around you as the birthday kid.
No,
I mean, other than at some point you got dragged up, you were allowed to come upstairs to
right.
have them sing happy birthday to you.
Or come inside.
Yeah, or come inside. And you may not even get the first piece of cake, by the way. Because, you were just a kid. The adults came first. But
But like, if I may interrupt there, a full stop on that, right? Like that's huge. That the kids were not first. In fact, you sort of didn't anticipate you would be, didn't expect it. And then it was an interesting space, I think, for both of us raising our children, where we had these babies that we cherished and adored. And how did we both lift them up in a way we wished we had been without overdoing it?
Right? So it's funny because one of the things I used to kind of tell myself is I really wanted to raise my kids so they wouldn't think they were the center of the universe. I didn't want to raise a bunch of narcissists. Well, we were just not only not the center of the universe.
No.
We were like a planet way out there,
Right. And I remember Dad being very concerned when Joel was just a baby toddler, and my praising and complimenting, with good job, Joel, look what you did, whatever. And he's like, why do you give so many compliments to him? That's not good for him. And I'm like, why not? And he said, well, because the world isn't going to do that. You shouldn't be. And I'm like, well, all the more reason I should be now, to help fill that cup. Because yes, the world is going to be shooting holes in it. But it's an interesting space. I don't know that I was totally right. It's just an interesting space.
Because we used to say, if you wanted to hear what our dad thought of us, you had to listen in when he was talking to someone else.
Exactly.
And it's not that we never got a pat on the back. It's just that a lot of things were expected. And so you were mostly meeting expectations. And and yet somehow we did know we were their whole world. And I think that just to clarify, Dad was born in 1924, served in World War II as a young man, never got a high school degree, and was, I think, only a couple of the 9 kids got high school degrees. And Mom was born in 1928. She was from a very abusive family. There was alcoholism. I mean, she really had no safety in her own home. And she really embraced this immigrant culture. And they both, had nothing, and grew up with nothing. And we had a lot in their eyes. And we grew up in Goodyear Heights, which was just far enough up the hill from Goodyear Tire and Rubber in Akron, Ohio, that you usually couldn't smell the plant, right? Maybe on a hazy day you could.
I'll never forget, Rita, when you wrote a poem one time, and there was just a line that really jumped at me. And it was before I learned that I lived on the wrong side of the track, I knew I lived at the top of a hill. And it's true for East Akron.
Yeah.
Goodyear Heights was like uptown.
Yeah. Right. And then we discovered there was whole
Then
West
we
Side.
discovered West Akron. Yeah. And wait, they have maids? They don't have to.
What's a country club? Right. Right. So yes, so that is where we came from. And so suddenly here we are. We now live in a whole new era, right? Mm-hmm. And the whole feminist movement has taken place. We grew up initially being taught that we should serve our brothers till, thank God, Jodi started to put her foot down on that. And I was like, yeah. By the way, Jodi is 3 years older than I am, but we were very close growing up. Very and still are, yes. I only had a few adolescent rocky moments, but pretty good overall. And the world was different. They were, everything's different, and it's different again. Parenting advice was way different. Mom and dad were shaking their heads a lot of times. Mm-hmm. They didn't hesitate to give their opinion. Mm-hmm. We knew it was coming. Mm-hmm. And we may not have always wanted it, but we also weren't in a big huff over it either, because compared to what they had, it was still easier, right?
Mm-hmm. I remember one sort of profound moment of setting the boundaries, where it was right after Joel was born, and Mom wanted me to bind his belly button. She wanted me to put a quarter on his belly button and bind it with gauze. And I was like, no. She said, just, you think you're so smart. Every once in a while, you should just listen to a parent. And at that point, the only source for parenting out there was Dr. Spock.
Yeah.
And I said, if Dr. Spock says I should bind the belly button, I'll do it. And we opened up the book, and it said, do not bind the belly button. It was like, so there. But there was, Mom was right about an awful lot of things. And there were a lot of things that she would tell me I would push back on, but I heard it. Mm-hmm. I kept thinking about it. And I found myself utilizing it more often than not.
Right. There is wisdom there. And I think that's the piece that we need to remember is, and that's why when I first heard the phrase what to keep and what to toss aside, when this kind of reflective look at family origin, I really liked it because there may be something to keep. Even Mom, as difficult as her family was, she was close to her sister and always prioritized this relationship with her sister. And while most of our sense of family came from our dad, we did see that. And we did know that mattered. And so she had kept something. So I had posed this question to Jodi of what to keep and what to toss aside. And so kind of as a prep for this, is the only prep is, what are your 3 things? What are mine? And they kind of line up pretty much into 3 good categories. So what were your 3 categories?
So the first one I'll bring up is dinner. And again, just this Italian home, food is the center, right? But with the food, it doesn't mean eating in front of a TV. Certainly in that day was not eating in front of a computer. But even raising my own children, and even though I don't think I was anywhere near as good of a cook as you are, food and the dinner table and the conversation that happened around the dinner table, the space at the dinner table, that was something that was strongly embedded in my memory and as an important part of what defined family. And so definitely knew I wanted to keep that, and did.
And it's interesting because Rick and I met young. So I was 17, he was 18, and he's 18 years old coming to my family's house for dinner. And he had this big family full of males, and so that created a whole different kind of culture. And he was like, you guys never get up from the table. Like, it's making me crazy. It's 2 hours. I'm to have dinner with your family. It's 2 hours of sitting at the table. We're done eating in, 40 minutes or something. We certainly don't rush, but and we definitely overate. But it's like you never get up from the table. And that was our life. I mean, everyone got a turn to talk about their day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember Mom leaving a space for you.
Because I was young.
Like, Rita, let's let Rita talk. Be quiet. Let Rita talk. Just as the youngest of 4, it would have been easy for your voice to not ever be heard. But Mom valued that each of us had a chance to speak at the table. And she was ahead of her time in that.
She was. And even though we did feel the balance was a little heavier toward the males and females in our family, still, it was not just the boy. They were not only 2 boys. We have 2 brothers, but they were the 2 oldest. So it would have been very easy for Jodi and I to be relegated to definitely second-class citizens. And the ways we saw that happen, we did fight back against. But still, we had a turn to talk too. And with my own kids, I had to work really hard. So I have 2 girls, then a boy. And everyone talks very fast in this family. And they're not super quiet in this family. And I had to work really hard to make the girls stop talking so that Vinny could even get a turn. And they didn't take that well. They felt I was favoring him. They couldn't see the unbalance, of course. They thought he's the same as us. If he wants to talk, just jump in. And they kind of couldn't understand the age difference because they were too young to understand that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because it doesn't matter if they understood or not.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that was really important for you to do that. It didn't matter if I understood. You being given the space, is what was important. And I think about, like, it's kind of like you take, what are you keeping? You keep it, but then you make it your own too, right? It's not like this full replication of exactly what you had. It's more the concept is what you're hanging on to, and then you're adapting it for yourself. And I can recall when the kids got to be about middle school age, they were, first of all, having dinner together became more difficult because they were involved in club soccer and they just had a lot going on. We were running back and forth, all the time. But when we were home together, we made sure there was a dinner table. But then there could be those quiet, sullen middle school kind of moments. And we started playing games at the dinner table. We started playing poker. We started playing, Connect Four. We started playing Pictionary. And what I found is that allowed whatever the mood was to be put aside. And we had this joyful space again at the dinner table. And then they would stay and sit and talk because now, a different relationship had kind of opened. Now, that was not something we would have ever done in our home growing up.
No, I don't think we played games as kids, but really there were not many times our parents played games with us, actually.
And if we were going to, it certainly would have been after dinner, not during dinner. But it worked for our family. I'm not saying that I, think everybody should do it, but for our family.
Right. You found a way.
Made a difference.
You found a way. Right. It does become more difficult once they are, in high school or involved in things that, the culture doesn't want us to have a family dinner. That's for darn sure. Right.
Right.
And I can remember that we would wait. Our brothers were both swimmers. And they would not get home from practice till 6 or 6:30, maybe even 7. And we would often wait dinner until that time. And there were times I would have to rush dinner before somebody went off to an event. And certainly there were days you just couldn't manage it, but having that as a priority, having a sense of that. And what we tried to do is, if anybody was dating anyone, like coming to dinner was one of the high priorities, right?
Great point. If you were dating somebody seriously, they had to come to dinner.
Yeah.
Like that was a requirement. And so if it wasn't somebody you felt comfortable bringing home to dinner, you probably were not going to keep dating them either. And it's interesting, to that point, I kept that. When somebody's name was coming up consistently, I was like, I'd like them to come to dinner. It didn't matter if I'd met them already or not. Something happens over the expanse of dinner that is different than just popping in, picking up, leaving,
And actually it was true of any good friend. Like any friend that you're hearing about, whether dating or not, just a friend. Dinner was a part of it. You had friends for dinner. And was that a hassle? Yeah, that was a hassle. It is a hassle to make dinner for a bunch of kids. And now my kids did know that just because they had a friend over didn't mean they didn't still have to go help clean up the kitchen. And so what they took pride in, weirdly, is that they wanted their friends to come and have the experience of helping prep the meal with us, eating the meal with us, and cleaning up together afterwards. They kind of saw that as this whole process that they ended up taking pride in, which was weird. Why did they take pride in it? Because they realized no one else was doing it.
Yeah.
They realized this was unique.
I may have told you this before, but it really sort of profoundly hit me when one of our teachers in a neighboring county said, right the first week of school, she had her students draw a picture of their family at dinner, which just that prompt alone is kind of interesting.
It's interesting.
But the number of kids who it was dad in the family room in front of the TV, mom in the kitchen on her laptop, and the kids in their own bedrooms gaming, all while eating dinner. That was dinner time. So you think that's not, and these are in very affluent homes, right? So there's no sense of dinner. There's no give and take of a conversation or a sharing of ideas or a challenging of ideas in a respectful manner. Like none of that is being practiced if everybody's in front of their devices.
Right. And I always am quoting Deborah Tannen's line that intimacy is in the details. I mean, you know more about your kids when you know the details of their day or their thoughts. So, even when we homeschooled, I knew the details of their day because I was part of their day. Their father didn't have the details of their day, but nobody really had their thoughts on the day until it got shared. For me to sit back and hear how they saw their day was really enlightening for me. And there was intimacy in that. Well, that will lead us, I think, nicely to the second thing was that we both agreed on was this priority of family.
Yeah.
Something we would keep. And I don't know, I'll let you expand on how that looked for your family.
There was always this sense of, for me growing up, and it may have felt different for you, but for me growing up, I always felt this security that I came from something bigger than myself, right? I was part of something important. And in fact, there was a bit of a mission for the way I viewed our family, that our grandparents came over as young teenagers to another country where they didn't speak the language, where they made their way, where they created this space as as far as we know, law-abiding citizens, or as far as we're sharing law-abiding citizens. And then our own father, who had a learning disability or a
Head injury.
head injury, and resulted in school difficulties and dropped out of high school. And, over and over, the one thing that no one can ever take away from you is your education, and that was like this big
Mantra.
driving force, right, for me to become an educator, and in particular wanting to work, in special needs and just all of these kinds of things. But there was also for me a sense of fragility, in that I also felt like I had to be just right. Like, as a woman, there were these expectations of me that I was pushing up against. And I felt like I could push up against them, but only a certain amount. I never really felt fully safe that no matter what I did, what I said, where I went, whatever, that I would still be welcomed back home. So that is a space that I wanted to change for my own children, that I felt was really important, that they get the message very clearly over and over again. I love you no matter what. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, where you go, what you become. I'm going to be proud of you for certain things and really concerned or unhappy for certain things, but I will always love you. I am always there for you. And there were not times that was put to the test, but times that I had that opportunity to state that clearly. And sometimes my kids would say things like, Mom, I know, whatever. And I'd be like, no, I didn't always know. I didn't always have full confidence in that. And I am here to tell you, you can have full confidence in that. And we always said, we just want our kids happy and healthy. And it turns out we really just only want our kids happy and healthy.
Yeah, right. That's true. That's mostly what we want when it comes down to it, is that. And for me, not happy, like, I don't know how to be unhappy. More that peace in themselves, joy.
Yeah.
That even in the midst of challenges, I have a sense of who I am, and that I can find relationships and support and be and find my way at peace, and so not just that I got my way this time, not that kind of happy, right? If we're talking about a deeper level of contentment. And I guess what I see is, it's interesting, Jodi's experience and my experience are different in that way. I was youngest, so she had to fight more of the daughter battles. I kind of just gleaned the results of them. Also, unfortunately, there was a little bit of like, you're in and you're out going on in the family with our parents. And so our mom in particular, I think, tended to battle more with Jodi and kind of accept me more easily. So, but the other thing is, I had Jodi doing that for me. So I guess that's that sense of family piece too, is we had managed to nurture each other and kind of raise each other. And our kids saw that. They saw that my relationship with you was a priority, and that our relationship with each other's kids was a priority, and that we wanted our kids to know each other. And that wasn't true of every sibling in our family, but we tried to do that with the siblings that we felt closer to, and those cousins consequently kind of had more experiences together. And that was even true in our extended family. We didn't have intimate, spend the night experiences with every cousin we had. It was a few families that we felt a closer kinship to.
Right. That's right. It was kind of like the sister-in-laws and the brothers that mom and dad connected with, and they had children about our ages. And so there was this real natural, more intimate connection with those cousins. But all the cousins kind of came into that intimate circle in different ways at different
sure. Yeah.
Which
it's not all like this perfect fairy tale of stuff. Like, there was
that would have been awesome.
Wouldn't it? Yeah. It was more just like, hey, in the midst of this drama, you and I still care about each other, and we're going to work this through. And my thing is, I felt there was value, first of all, bouncing parenting ideas off of someone who came from where I came from, who was dealing with the, hey, what are we keeping and tossing aside, and also that you are important enough to me that I want to hear about your kids and what's going on with them and how, and let you know that I love them and, all of that. So there was kind of this sense of family. And I see my children now, because my kids now all have children, they are already talking about, won't it be great? I mean, they're kind of idolizing it, but because they're remembering all the good stuff, right?
Yeah.
But they're like, won't it be great? We're going to have the cousins get together, and they're going to grow up and see each other. And you can tell that sense that knowing where you came from was helpful.
And to kind of swing back around to the love, and I'm not saying that I don't have women friends who I fully love and trust and would value and do value their opinion, but you've always been first in the room for me with that. And I do, when you talk about like raising our kids, I can remember turning to you for help. Joel was not sick a lot, but he had allergies, and we weren't sure about his speech development. I don't know that I would have been not sure about his speech development, but you were, and you helped me to know and understand it, and to know and understand the importance of tubes. And it gave me the strength to kind of push back on the doctor, with some knowledge and understanding because of you talking to me and opening that space. And then later with Sarah, she had an oral motor weakness. I didn't know she did, but you knew she did. And you helped to connect me with the place in Augusta for her to go for therapy. And our family doctor fully listened to you and what you had to say as a speech
which was amazing.
Well, yeah, and he's a special doctor, let me say. But also, again, it was this combination of your knowledge, experience, but I loved and trusted you. So even though you were telling me things,
well, you knew I was saying it out of love, right?
Exactly. You were telling me things that were hard to hear and hard to think about, but I knew that you loved them as much as I did, and would only be having me think about those things out of love, not out of criticism or superiority, or I don't know what else you could put on it, but none of those things.
Right. Yeah, there was never that agenda between you and I. And I do think our relationship maybe is somewhat ideal between sisters. I don't think all sisters are as close. Certainly my two daughters were not as close. I mean, when they're young and playing together, they're very close, and then life gets to be what it is, and everybody kind of goes their own way. And I think my daughters are working on their relationship now, where you and I didn't actually, we had 98%, more cohesive moments, and short times of maybe not. And even in the times when we were in different places with different values and different thoughts, I think we always really would, and even still, we're the one place we can have a conversation where we have different views and be kind and, respectful. But I think we just know we have like so much equity in the relationship that the hard times just get dealt with.
Right. And that should apply to a lot of relationships and a lot of situations, like if you just keep leaving space for each other, like even if it's not perfect at this moment, you just keep leaving space for each other. And if you keep trying to assume goodwill, like, okay, maybe she didn't mean that tone of voice. Where else might that have been coming from? Or why did she react that way? How did I say that? Did it sound the way I meant it to sound? Maybe I need to go back and apologize, even if I'm not sure the what or the why. It's again, just if you value it. And for your spouse, you're in front of each other day in, day out. So yeah, you're going to be circling back around. You and I had to make sure we kept circling back around because you were in Ohio and I was in Georgia, and it wasn't always that we could just text or
no.
It had to be like after 11 o'clock,
and it costs money.
And ask for the dog.
Yeah, I mean, I would have these conversations with my husband about how much, the line item on our budget for me talking to my sister long distance, right?
Exactly.
And it was like, this is like the mental health bill.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm thinking that this is maybe a good break point because the thing Jodi and I want to toss aside is the way punishment and consequences were handled in our family. And, as you can imagine, we came from, a family that could be a little heavy-handed. But anyway, so I'm going to let that be our break. But Jodi had some good words around this idea about tossing aside how we were punished. And what had you said about that, Jodi?
Well, it really hit. It comes from my field. I taught primarily emotional behavior disorders, and as you're trying to extinguish one behavior, you have to replace it with another. And I remember just having my firstborn 2-year-old tantrums, and I knew I didn't want to smack him. Like, I didn't like being smacked. I didn't think it was the best approach. I was a teacher and I wasn't smacking anybody. Like, surely I could do better with my own child, but what? What does one do with a 2-year-old? What behavior would I replace for myself? Everything that I knew and grew up with. And it gives you pause, right? Makes you have to consider your options carefully.
Right. So I'm going to end on that because we will come back with that idea and we're going to pick up right with that idea. But as always, so fun to talk to you, Jodi, and I will see you in part 2.
All right. Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Rooted In podcast. At Rooted In Language, we believe learning happens best in relationship. And the family culture we each create influences our children's growth and development. Let's be intentional. Join me for part 2 of this podcast when Jodi and I discuss our decisions around behavior management and its impact on our kids, and maybe on us. As always, we appreciate your listening and your support. Be sure to follow us on social media, including Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, as well as your favorite podcast platform. When you like our podcasts and videos, and when you share them with your friends, you help others find our information. Also, be sure to visit and share our website, rootedinlanguage.com. You can help us help others. Thanks a lot.